Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar hosted by MIT. We're just waiting for a few participants to get into the room. I'm just going to keep talking for a few seconds so that you all know that there's someone alive here. Welcome as you're arriving. My name is Peter Hurst. I am the head of executive education at the MIT Sloan School of Management, and it is our pleasure and privilege to be helping our friends in the consulate and the British American Business Council of New England to host this webinar for you today to have a great conversation between Harriet Cross and Peter Abbott. And in a moment, I am going to hand over to Peter Pound from British American Business Council of New England to kick off the proceedings. Before doing so, I would just like to make a couple of technical announcements to provide you with help here. You'll see at the bottom of your screen, there is both a Q&A and a chat function that is there. We'd like to ask you, please, if you have any questions that you would like us to put to Harriet and Peter during the course of the webinar, if there is time to do so, please use the Q&A function for doing that. That helps us just sort through the questions that are coming in. So with that, I would like to now introduce the Vice President of the British American Business Council of New England, Peter Pound, who will introduce the event, and I will come back a little later to help with some of the hosting functions. So with that, Peter, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this very exciting webinar. We're very pleased today, the British American Business Council of New England, to be hosting a handover event. So to speak. It was billed, I think, as a fireside chat in true New England fashion. We should call it a fire pit chat at this time of the season. We're absolutely delighted to have this opportunity virtually to do two important things. One is to lament and be sad about the send-off of Harriet. We'll be hearing a little bit in the back and forth between Harriet and Peter Abbott regarding her plans for where she's headed. But we're also today delighted to welcome Dr. Peter Abbott, who is the incoming Consul General. He'll be, I think, taking up the reins officially at the end of the first week of September. So I'm just going to start with a couple quick bio background notes, and then we're going to pivot to Harriet and Peter to actually just have a conversation so you can get to hear some reflections from Harriet on her time here and her thoughts about where she's headed. And you'll get to hear some reflections from Peter on where he's come from and what he's been doing and what he's excited about for starting here. So many of us, if not all of us, know Harriet well. Harriet Cross has served as Her Majesty's Consul General to New England since August of 2016. And during her time in Boston, Harriet has led initiatives in all 6 New England states, engaging the governors, academia, and business leaders on trade, investment, science, politics, the LGBTQ, and diversity inclusion discussions. She showcased New England's strengths to a multitude of high-profile visitors to New England, such as Her Majesty's Ambassador to the US, Her Majesty's Ambassador to China, His Royal Highness the Earl of Wessex, the former Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, and a number of trade delegations, as well as UK government ministers and members of Parliament. And, which a great pleasure, is that during her tenure here, she also found time to sneak in a master's in international relations from Tufts, so she'll always have a tie to us here. And she's also recently led efforts to repatriate British citizens from across the globe during the COVID-19 pandemic. Harriet leaves Boston in September to take up the ambassadorial role of High Commissioner to Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Peter Abbott is succeeding Harriet as Her Majesty's Consul General to New England from his current role as counselor in Islamabad, Pakistan. The embassy in Pakistan is the largest UK government post outside the UK, and Peter brings extensive experience from his postings, including as Deputy Head of Mission and Head of the Political Section in Lisbon, Portugal, where the 2016 EU referendum and the subsequent negotiation of the withdrawal agreement dominated his time. Peter has also worked in leading the government's review of UK counter-radicalization strategy called PREVENT, based in the Office for Secretary and Counter-Terrorism at the Home Office. In addition, Peter is not new to the US, having previously served as private secretary to the Ambassador Scheinwald from 2008 to 2010, and during the election of President Obama. And before joining the FCDO, Peter interned in the office of Dennis Hastert when he was the Speaker of the US House of Representatives, in addition to working on Arianna Huffington's 2003 gubernatorial campaign in California. Peter holds a double first-class honors degree from the University of Cambridge, as well as a PhD in Greek tragedy. And Peter is the proud husband and father of 3. So it'll be a little early to say farewell right now to Harriet, but farewell to Harriet. And welcome, Peter. And now I'd like to turn it over to the two of you to let us hear some thoughts, Harriet, and have a chance to get to know Peter.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Peter Pound and Peter Hurst. We've got an abundance, a joyous abundance of Peters today, so it's wonderful. Firstly, thank you so much to Babacne for organising this event. The welcome event that Babacne did for me in the old State House in September 2016 goes into my sort of bag of fondest memories. And I'm really sad that Peter can't have that same experience, but we've tried to replicate it here. And I'm delighted to see that so many of Babacne friends and colleagues have joined this call. So we look forward to you getting to know Peter and to enabling me to say goodbye. I'm going to just do a little bit of the kind of, you know me, I'm sort of 50% professional, 50% fun and silliness. So let me just give you a blast of 50% professional first. So a few things that have sort of really been threads throughout my time in Boston. Firstly, it's Brexit, the UK leaving the EU. The referendum was just announced just before I took up this position. And it's been, you know, a bumpy ride, to be fair. But one thing that I've been able to do all the way through is communicate to the business community in Boston about what was happening, to understand your concerns and to hear from you as to what we need to do as a government to make it as bump-free as possible. So the UK has now left the EU. We've just finished the latest round of negotiations. We're still essentially in the single market and the customs union to all intents and purposes, but we will leave that at the end of 2020. So Peter Abbott there will still be some EU conversations to be had between now and the end of the year. And we really actually don't know what that final agreement will look like. We're hoping for an agreement that looks a bit like a Canada model, i.e. the relationship that the EU has with Canada. But it could be more like the relationship the EU has with Australia, which is a little bit looser. So Peter will be ready to tell you all about that a little bit later in the year. The other strand has been American politics, which I won't talk too much about, but of course President Trump was elected again shortly after I arrived in November 2016. You've got another election coming up in the next few months, which again, it's a really, you know, this 4-year timing does lead to some real sort of interesting milestones. One thing that as a diplomat, you know, we very much keep arm's distance from domestic politics, but it will be really interesting to see how domestic politics affects the UK-US free trade agreement that we're currently in the process of negotiating. So again, something that Peter will talk to you about later in the year. We had Liz Truss, who's our Secretary of State for International Development. She was in Washington just a few weeks ago, in fact, talking to all sorts of very senior US representatives about the free trade agreement. She covered comms, digital trade, business mobility, which I know is something that's really important for Babacne members and probably people on this call. You know, we need the visa regime to enable businessmen and women to cross the Atlantic and to be able to do their business in each other's countries. And so that's something that's very much on our agenda. And similarly, small and medium-sized businesses. I say this with a lot of passion because I'm a small business owner myself, but that really is the backbone UK-US trade, and again, something that Babacni promotes the interests of small and medium-sized businesses really, really well. So something that I've really enjoyed talking to Babacni members about, and something that I'm really pleased to see is, again, a real priority for the UK-US Free Trade Agreement. And I think finally, the other thing that has really been a feature of my time here is the clean energy revolution, which has really taken off in my 4 years here, particularly in New England. So we developed really good relationships with New Bedford in Massachusetts, who were you know, a fishing port, but one that was a little bit past its time. You know, the fishing wasn't really bringing in the prosperity and the jobs that it had in the past. And we sort of shared some of our experiences of places like that in the UK, like Grimsby and Hull, and many towns in Scotland. And you know, not just the technology, but the kind of the whole supply chain of offshore wind is really interesting. And again, it's a real source of jobs on both sides of the Atlantic. So I've really enjoyed seeing that flourish. I mentioned Massachusetts. Rhode Island has already also really taken off in terms of its offshore wind capacity. And Maine, Governor Janet Mills went to Scotland earlier this year, back in January, to look at floating offshore wind platforms. So our relationship there has been really, really close. And again, it's something that I would really expect to continue and to expand in the coming years. So that for me has been something that I've been proudest of, I think, contributing to the clean energy revolution. So I think I'll stop there. I think I've sort of given you a bit of a highlight of things that have been the feature of my time here. I know you're all really keen to hear from Peter. So let me kick off by asking Peter, in classic kind of interview style, why did you apply for this job, Peter? What attracted you to Boston when you've got literally the world as a diplomat? You've got the world to apply for your jobs from. Why did you come to Boston? Over to you.
Well, thank you, Harriet, for the opening question. Thank you, Peter Pound. Thank you, Peter Hurst, for the very warm welcome to Boston and to this discussion. I really look forward to working with Babacni and all of your members, so many of whom are on the line today, over the next 4 years. Really, really exciting time, I think, to be in Boston. And a huge thanks to Harriet as well. I've got some big shoes to fill coming into this role, but know that there's some fantastic relationships that she's built up that I hope that I'll be able to take over when I start in a couple of weeks. So why did I apply to come to Boston? Boston was the only job that I applied for. It's always good to be able to say that. There was no one else in competition. There are lots of reasons actually why I applied to come here to Boston. I met my wife Lindsay in Washington on my first posting. She's a US national. My kids are dual UK-US nationals. So coming back to the US was a really important thing for us as a family after Lindsay and the kids had spent sort of 8 years outside the United States, in Pakistan, and then in Portugal and London before that. So coming back to the US was important. But I think most importantly, coming to Boston, coming to New England, kind of feels like coming home for any Brit. And it's just amazing looking at the map, you know, from Falmouth to Portsmouth to Bristol to Glasgow to Belfast. You know, it's just like a sort of a palimpsest, a kind of a map of the UK transported onto the US. And so that, from a starting point, just makes it feel like coming home. And I know it's not. And I've often said that whenever British diplomats get posted to so-called foreign countries, we always have quite a lot of training and quite a lot of in-depth research on the foreign country that you go to. But whenever we get posted to the US, we think, oh well, you know, we've watched Friends and we've watched some movies, and so we don't need to really understand the US. But I've always maintained that actually the UK and the US are quite different countries, despite being separated by a common language, as the saying goes. There is quite a lot that is different about the US, and I think one of the things I'm looking forward to, as well as that sense of familiarity with New England, is discovering all the things that are unique about it, both in terms of the kind of the professional side of things, and in terms of the personal things we're looking forward to exploring about New England.
That your point about the sort of being a foreigner in a familiar land is really something that has struck me. There are so many times when you feel really comfortable, and I think we've actually got quite a similar sense of humour in New England, in the way that maybe you wouldn't find on the West Coast with people from the UK. But I remember I had a conversation with a female colleague whose name shall be not mentioned to protect the innocent, but when she bounced into my office and said, "Harriet, I'm wearing suspenders today," and as a British person, when somebody says that to you, your jaw kind of drops and you're like, oh. And then she pulled off her cardigan and pulled out these braces and said, "Yeah, super cool." But I had a completely different image in my mind. So those little surprises, even 3 or 4 years into your posting, can, it's nice to be reminded that actually there's so much that we've got to learn as well. That it's not a comfortable kind of fit always, which is nice. Okay, feel free to ask me some questions, but I do want to ask another one to you, which is really, I spoke a bit about the things that I'd really enjoyed in my time here, or things that had coloured my time here. What are you most excited to explore, both professionally and personally, in your time here, as far as you can tell at this point in time?
So I think starting professionally, I think there are sort of 2 things, I suppose, that are most exciting to me. First is the sort of the knowledge economy, the university clusters that you have here in New England, the startups, the catapult centres, all of those, that kind of nucleus of intellectual capital, creativity, innovation. It just sort of almost gives me goosebumps a little bit to think about how exciting a concentration there is of just really, really smart, I was almost said wicked smart people here in New England that I'm looking forward to getting to know, many of whom are on this call today. Peter rather embarrassingly mentioned my PhD. So I do have a little bit of an academic background, and it was enough to pique my interest in academia. Not quite enough to keep me in it, I have to say, but enough to pique my interest about academia. I'm very, very much looking forward to kind of exploring that, the length and breadth of New England over the next 4 years. The second thing on my sort of professional list of things I'm looking forward to, and you alluded to this, Harriet, when you talked about renewable energy and the clean energy kind of revolution, not just clean energy and renewable energy, but also the blue economy. Having spent 4 years in Lisbon, where the Portuguese have one of the largest marine reserves in the world, my interest in the blue economy and in protecting our oceans and using our oceans sustainably has been very, very significant. I'm looking forward to exploring that more here in New England with the fantastic coastline that you have here. On a professional side, on a personal side, I'm really looking forward to going to Fenway Park and watching the Red Sox play again. I don't know when that's going to be, but I hope it's going to be soon. We've driven past it several times already. I'm very, very keen to go and indulge my slightly remote love of baseball. I've always, I know there are American sports fans are some of the most fanatical, I think, in the world, and everyone has their sport. I've always quite liked the slightly slower nature of baseball as compared to American football or hockey or basketball, and particularly the kind of the historical links to baseball and the way that baseball fans have this just wonderful sense of history and moment and narrative about their sport. And so I'm looking forward to getting back into baseball. And then it may be because it's lunchtime. I'm also looking forward to your food, the clam chowder, the maple syrup, the cranberries, the lobster, the crab. I mean, all of that. I just can't wait to literally and metaphorically get my teeth into. And I know, Harriet, you know much more about this than I do, the craft beer as well in New England. I'm looking forward to some amazing pairings between seafood and craft beer. So lots that we're really looking forward to.
I know everybody who's on this call is going to say, the moment I knew Peter was a good guy, it's when he said that he really loved baseball. That's it. We could just stop the call here, right here and now. You say you've got big shoes to fill, but honestly, I feel I have failed Boston because I am not really a sports lover. It doesn't really hook me. So you are really going to brings something special to the Consul Generalship if you've got a real... Paolo, our press and public affairs guy, I think he just, like, whenever we're doing something sport related, he just puts his head in his hands as far as I'm concerned. Having said that, the thing that, and I have seen every single one of the kind of New England American sports, I absolutely have. And the one I like most actually was hockey. I actually really like the kind of violence of it. You know, I think actually I went to the University of New Hampshire and I saw a college game and they were fierce. You know, they were really whacking each other. And I said, oh, God, I like this because you've got all the sounds and all that. So, yeah, I think it's fantastic that you come with a love of baseball. I wanted to ask if you mentioned about the ocean. Have you been to Cape Cod already? Have you explored the Cape, or is that something that's to come for you? I'd wondered if you'd done it from Washington before.
I did. I mentioned I met my wife, Lindsay, in Washington. One of our first trips together was actually to Cape Cod, and we stayed near Provincetown and spent some time on the Cape, and actually cooked our own lobsters in a scene slightly reminiscent. I can't remember which Woody Allen film it is, but there's one of his films where they're trying to cook lobster together, and the lobster keeps escaping from the pot, and they're kind of chasing it around the kitchen. It was a little bit like that. But we have spent some time on the Cape already, and can't wait to go back. Paolo, who is on the line, has just said it's Annie Hall. Oh, someone else has said it's Manhattan. So there's clearly a debate here as to which of the Woody Allen films it is. But no, it was a great experience. We love the Cape, and we can't wait to go back.
Yeah, it has been one of my favourite places. Definitely, if I was thinking about the places where just personally I've just thought, God, this is gorgeous. Definitely the Cape. Although, as I said when I was doing my Twitter A to Z, never made it to Martha's Vineyard, never made it to Nantucket, which I think is almost unforgivable. But I blame COVID because I did have plans that got cancelled. I also love Portland, Maine. Again, it's one of those places where I just feel so comfortable. You know, it's like it's a city, but it's small and walkable, gorgeous, a great craft beer in Maine. I mean, I think of all New England, maybe it's the kind of the most outstanding, I would say, but brilliant breweries in Boston proper as well, I have to say. Trillium, Night Shift. Another brewery that I really like is Notch Brewery in Salem, and that's another time, if you haven't been to Salem, Peter, definitely put it on the list. I tell you, I never made it during Halloween, and that was kind of deliberate, because I thought it might be just all a bit too crazy. But again, the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, for one thing, is absolutely gorgeous. So that was one of the places that I've been to time and time again. Just recently, I went there and had pizza and beer. It's fantastic. Anyway, it's a bit of my nostalgia there. I wanted to ask, because I'm always really interested in these questions. Diplomats are really very much generalists, and I think we kind of disguise that because we're really good at pretending that we know what we're talking about, but you know, the secret is we really don't know anything. And our local staff, like Kirsten Chambers, our head of DIT, like Paolo Di Fabio, who's our head of politics and press, like Ronnie Prower, our head of SIN, they're the real experts, and they're the kind of the powerhouses behind what we do. But the added value that we have is that we go and do these kind of generalist jobs all around the world, and in Peter's introduction he gave a sense of where you'd been before, and we pick up these amazing talents and knowledge and skill from completely different places, and we can then deploy things that we've learned in completely different circumstances. So I'm interested to know, I know nothing about Pakistan. Is there anything that you think that you'll take from there that you think actually that'll be really useful here in Boston?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think, you know, in many ways the postings couldn't be more different. So at the macro level, Pakistan is a completely different country from the US. The economy is completely different. The concerns of the country are completely different. And as Peter Pound said, the High Commission in Islamabad is our largest single post overseas. And the consulate here in Boston is much smaller than that, perfectly formed, of course, but much smaller than that. So in some ways they couldn't be much more different. But I think, you know, I was thinking about this question earlier. I think one of the things that I take from Pakistan is the way that we handled coronavirus. And you know, the last sort of 4 or 5 months, as for many of us, I think, working in this kind of area, you know, we've really developed a sense of how to manage this pandemic, and how to manage the way that this crisis has affected the way that people work and the way that people think and feel, and the things that people are worried about. Just to give a flavour, the High Commission in Islamabad has about 126 British diplomats at it, working there across about a dozen government departments, and there are also somewhere around 230 families and dependents. So it's a very large community. I was counsellor for corporate services there, which means that I ran everything from the financial side to the HR to the estate. And so I was in some ways I was like a sort of a mayor of a small town, kind of fixing people's toilets, making sure the water was clean, making sure they had kind of safe accommodation and things. But I was also in charge of putting in place all of the measures to help deal with coronavirus. And because we all lived on a compound, it meant that I had to, you know, figure out how to put in place measures around the playground or the swimming pool or the club that we used, making sure that the hands were being washed, and all of that kind of standard stuff that we take for granted now was put in place in those initial first few weeks when the pandemic was really at its height in Pakistan. And it just taught me a lot about human emotion and about human motivation, and the way that different people respond to risk in really, really different ways. And, you know, New England has a fantastic record, frankly speaking. I'm sure there'll be people on the line that will probably take issue with some of this, but if you look at New England across the United States and compare it with other regions of the US, you guys have done a really, really great job at keeping the curve as low as possible here. So I think the way that we dealt with it in a much smaller level at the High Commission in Islamabad will kind of help me understand how it's being managed here, and help, I hope, me understand the sort of motivations of the staff here at the consulate of getting back to work and you know, getting back to some sort of normality over the next few weeks and months.
Yeah. And we got through 27 minutes without really mentioning COVID, which is pretty good. I mean, we need to mention it, we need to talk about it, but I'm really delighted that it hasn't sort of dominated the conversation so far. So that sounds like incredibly challenging in Pakistan. It's a slightly unfair question, but what do you think might be the most challenging part of the CG in Boston role? I know I've probably got some ideas myself, but I know we always do quite a lot of preparation as before we come into a job, and I know you've been looking through the job and the trade stats and all this. What do you think is like, you know, this is going to be tough?
So I think, and without wishing to come back to COVID, I think anybody arriving as a head of mission anywhere in the world at the moment is just facing a much more complicated scenario. And Harriet will come on to talk about how you're hoping to make impact in Trinidad and Tobago. But diplomacy in a time of COVID is you know, for a diplomat who you know, both Harriet and I and diplomats the world over rely on that personal connection to make impact and to build relationships. And although this works really well, and you know, all of us have become adept in, you know, making sure you've got the right background. There's all sorts of fantastic memes on the internet about bookshelves and, you know, what sorts of things you should have behind you. We've all become adept at using these kind of tools to make connections with people, but it's no substitute for that personal connection. And I think you know, one of the hardest things for me, and for you, Harriet, as well, and for others, will be building those relationships mostly via Zoom and Teams and WebEx and things that we would have done, having receptions, having lunches and dinners, inviting people over to use the amazing residence that we have here, traveling around, getting to know some of those places, Harriet, that you mentioned. I think finding a way to work within that is going to be one of the most challenging things for me as I start here. And I sort of apologize in advance, really, that we can't do more in person. But I do hope, it's my very, very fervent hope that by the end of this year, the beginning of next, we will be moving into a very different phase, and hopefully getting back to something that feels like normal. I do, however, think that this virus will be with us in many ways for a long time to come. And I think our practice of wearing masks and social distancing will be something that we will have to live with for a long time. But getting my head around how to be a diplomat in the time of COVID, I think, is the biggest challenge.
Harriet, if I may, there's a great question from Steve Ramsey in the Q&A. Perhaps I can just read it out. Steve says, "Thank you, Harriet, for everything that you've done to further develop the UK-US relationship. Peter, welcome to the CG role and region. As you onboard into the role, what can we do as BABCNE members and those with UK ties do to support your onboarding into this role?" Seemed very timely with what you just said.
Well, that's a great question, and thank you. I mean, this is the first. We were joking earlier, Harriet and I. This is sort of like my my introduction to Boston. It's the first thing that my first outing since I arrived. I actually just came out of quarantine yesterday, so it's my first moment to do something official. You've already done a great, it's just getting this invitation out and getting this conversation started is a fantastic first step, and thank you to all of you for making it possible. But I hope you will all drop me a line afterwards. My email address is just like Harriet's. It's peter.abbott@fco.gov.uk. I'd love to hear from you. Please introduce yourselves that way. Let me know what where you work, what you're into, what you're worried about or interested in, and I'd love to get started with building some of those personal relationships remotely.
And maybe you just encouraged me, Peter Hurst, to look at the Q&A, and I did see there was one from Andrew. Hi, Andrew. And you were asking about opportunities arising for trade between the UK and the US Northeast. I think I would. Firstly, I want to quote the stats that I always quote because I think they're super impressive. So there are about 400 British subsidiaries in the New England region, and they are creating jobs, and they will continue to create jobs for sort of 40,000 odd people. So that's a really solid base. Also, if you look at exports from New England to the UK, they are worth more than $8 billion, which I think is really remarkable. And again, creating tens of thousands of jobs. So that's our starting point. And when I talk to my team, soon to be Peter's team in the Department for International Trade, they are still winning business. So we were on a team call this morning, and the head of our life sciences team here said that they had just won $18 million worth of investment. I can't say who just yet because it'll be released at some point, but that is really, really exciting for me, that I think the relationships are such that we're not really seeing an enormous cliff edge in terms of COVID damaging trade. So that's the sort of business as usual. But then going on to the free trade agreement, and I mentioned earlier on about the SME chapter, for example. There's also your services chapter. Now, I think once that FTA really gets in a bit more shape than it's in at the moment, once we start pinning things down, I think we'll find that there are increased opportunities for New England businesses. For example, good example of what I'd love to see come out of it is licensing. So maybe a license that you've got in the US is actually going to be valid now in the UK through the free trade agreement, where it wasn't before. That's where the opportunities are. And again, really encourage, most people on this line know that we've got a fantastic DIT team, but they provide free services. So you can ask them for advice about opening up an office in the UK, about bringing business from the UK to Massachusetts. There's probably some people on the line now who are really great success stories. These delegations that we bring across from the UK to the US, it's more than surface deep. These people, Remarketing is a really good example of a company from the northeast of England who came across on a number of trade delegations. Raman and his family actually ended up moving to Boston and creating a ton of business and a ton of opportunities and jobs for people in New England. So I think there's a really fertile seam to continue to dig on that. I'm really excited for Peter. There are lots of opportunities, and I think the FTA will open that up further. And actually, that's a bit of a segue into the final question that I had for Peter, which was, in your as you've been looking at the New England landscape, is there anything in terms of trade and investment, or maybe science and innovation, is there anything that you've seen that you think, oh gosh, I didn't know that, or that's surprising, that's impressive? Because one of the things I think people get bored with me saying it, but I sometimes think New England is a little bit of a hidden gem, and that people in the UK, they think about California and they think about New York, and actually the people who really know what they're talking about will very quietly come to New England and do a lot of business, but it's not necessarily something that's on the tip of people's tongues. So it can be surprising when you learn about the volume of trade. Anything that particularly stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a remarkable part of the country, and I think, you know, for me, what stood out was the sheer volume of exports. I mean, UK ranks third in Massachusetts exports, so nearly $3 billion, and nearly 80,000 US jobs are supported by UK companies in New England. I think that's a remarkable figure, and I think most people probably don't know that it's that scale. That's mostly concentrated in Massachusetts, but not completely. I mean, there are thousands of US jobs that are supported by British companies in all of the 6 New England states that are covered in this part of the world, which is really fantastic. And I think we're sitting here in Kendall Square, and I was amazed to see about the sheer concentration of startups and tech unicorns that exist here in Boston is second only to Silicon Valley, and in some areas it's even bigger than Silicon Valley. And like you said, Harriet, people think, oh, California. Well, actually, some of the really exciting stuff is happening here in New England. And the diversity of sectors, I think, that we work with is huge, really, really interesting. Biopharma, education, defense, creative industries, energy and the environment. The sheer diversity is really, really, really encouraging, and it fills me with enthusiasm for getting stuck in.
Brilliant. All right, that's the grilling. That's your grilling done.
Well, Peter, I don't know if this is my chance to grill Harriet. Would you? It's a good time to do that.
I think that's a fabulous idea.
Great. Okay. All right. Well, I've got some really difficult questions here for you, Harriet. The first one, which I thought I would tempt you with, is whether we talked about what happened when you arrived in the US that year, 2016, the huge year with the referendum, with the election of Donald Trump in the autumn of that year. Looking back over the 4 years that you've been Consul General, how do you see the relationship evolving between the US and the UK over that time, either with the US as a whole or with New England in particular? And what would you say within that? What was your greatest achievement or thing you're proudest of doing as Consul General?
So a classic line that you'll know, Peter, because diplomats use it all the time. We say, when we're asked about disagreements between countries, we say, well, good friends can have disagreements and still be good friends. And I think that's a good example of our relationship with the US over the last few years. So there are things that we've disagreed about, the Iran dossier being a good example. To a certain extent, our relationship with China and Huawei being another, in terms of the kind of the federal relationship. And actually, again, going back to the question of climate change and decarbonisation, one thing that the British government decided to do, because there wasn't really an entry point into talking to the federal government about climate change issues, the UK said, all right, we'll do it at a subnational level. So that's something that I've really seen take off in the last few years, that we're having conversations with Governor Baker and his team about climate, talking to Governor Mills. So that's been really great for us as the kind of, the network posts out of the embassy in Washington. It's given us more substantive work to do, because we're having really serious conversations about, we've got something called the Powering Past Coal Alliance, which really is quite an ambitious, with ambitious targets to get states to decarbonize, and we got Connecticut to sign up to that, which was felt like a real win at the time, because they're a substantive state, quite one of the more industrial states in the New England patch. So that was an interesting one. And again, those conversations will continue because the UK is hosting COP26 in November next year. So that interaction not only with the governors, but actually with institutions like MIT, like Boston University, they're all doing really interesting things with cities to combat climate. So that's something that I've seen flourish at the subnational level because of the approach that the federal government has taken on certain issues. You know, I've also seen the change of ambassadors between in my time, Kim Darroch to Karen Pierce, and again, two people with really different styles. And actually inheriting very different circumstances. And Karen has really barely got out of quarantine herself. You know, she just arrived really just a few, maybe it's a couple of months now. But that's, I think that will really be interesting to see how Karen engages with the administration, because she's a brilliant diplomat. And because of COVID, she hasn't really had the opportunity to do that quite yet, because, as you say, the challenge of not being able to have those in-person meetings. But that, I think, will be really interesting to see. The thing that I'm proudest of, I've mentioned clean energy. I won't reiterate that, but it's definitely on the list. I've really liked the stuff that we've done on LGBTQ rights. The Consul General before me was the first Consul General to take the consulate to march in the Boston Pride parades. And we've done that every year, apart from this year, because of COVID, that I've been here. And we've kind of got more people, had more of a presence every single year. We've also engaged businesses to talk about their diversity policies, which again, we hadn't done before. We spoke to Reebok, we've spoken to actually a number of financial institutions who have really quite sophisticated LGBTQ staff kind of policies and groupings. So we've learned a lot from business about diversity, and that's something that we hadn't really gone down that path before. So I'm really pleased that we managed to do that. I'll stop there.
No, that's great. Thank you, Harriet. I think just reflecting on the first part of your answer, I think one of the remarkable things about the US-UK relationship is that it almost doesn't matter which government you have in power, that actually the depth of the relationship is about the individual people-to-people links, and they are so deep and so thorough that it sort of continues regardless of whether there is a sort of a local disagreement or not between the two governments. What do you wish that you knew about before you arrived? If you could have known something before you arrived in New England 4 years ago, what would that have been?
It's a good question. You know what? I'm sort of slightly answering a different question, which is a perfect politician's way of doing it. I'm going to say what I might have done slightly differently instead. And I think I wish that I had been a bit more. What's the word I'm looking for? I wish I'd spent more time going out to other parts of New England. It's a strange tension because a lot of the kind of the powerhouse stuff that happens in Boston, to be, you know, just in terms of, you know, when we're talking about the volume of investment wins or the absolute brilliance of some of the businesses that are here doing, you know, the vaccine work and stuff. A lot of it happens in Kendall Square, never mind in Boston. It happens within 200 feet of where the office is. So sometimes you can think, look, is it really worth me going to Portland, Maine? Is it worth me going to Hartford, Connecticut? And I kind of had that bit of a struggle myself, but I did get out. But I wish I'd got out a bit more consistently. So I guess that would be sort of be the advice that I'd say to you. If you can plan your visits, and everything's so close, you know, you can drive. You in 2 hours you're in Connecticut. In 2 hours you're in Portland, Maine. I got up as far as Bangor, Maine, but you can obviously go a lot further if you want to. So that's what I wish I'd planned a bit more from the start, because you know what it's like. It's very easy to sit in the heart of something and not to explore the rest of it enough.
Yeah. No, one of my biggest regrets about Pakistan was not having got out and about more. But there's really no excuse for me here. It's considerably easier to travel around New England than it is to travel around Pakistan. And I'm probably going to regret this, but just to go back to one of the previous questions about how can you guys help with my onboarding, send me invitations to things.
You are going to regret that.
I won't be able to come to all of them, but I will do my best. And I know my family want to travel with me as well and get around the region. So send those invitations in. Okay, all right, Harriet. What will you miss the most? And I only want one thing. You're not allowed 3 things or 6 things. Just one thing.
Easy. Veggie Galaxy. Everybody knew I was going to say that. It's my favourite diner. It's 15 minutes walk from the consulate. It looks like a classic American diner. So you've got your swirly like vinyl stools, you've got the slightly kind of 1950s vibe going on. They do milkshakes and onion rings, and they do this thing called a mac and stack, which is a waffle made with mac and cheese, done in poured into a waffle maker. So 2 waffles with a burger and all the fixings. I just love it. And of course they've been closed because of COVID. They've just started doing takeout. So you will find me hanging outside like a kind of drug addict outside Veggie Galaxy, waiting for my little bag to be handed to me. And then I go and sit on a bench and eat it. So that's what I'll miss above all else is Veggie Galaxy. And I've still got Kirsten Chambers. We have got a date to have a chocolate frappe there. So I've still got, I'd like to think that I've got at least another 5 visits in me before I leave, maybe more.
Well, my last final question was what are you going to take with you to Trinidad and Tobago? But it might be a Mac stack.
I wish it was. Oh, you know what? I'm going to take not only just memories, but I've got some beautiful pictures that people have given me. So I've got a map of Beacon Hill from the team. Kirsten Chambers, who is a very talented artist, who does beautiful pictures out of postage stamps, gave me a beautiful picture to take with me. The Ulster University Alumni Association gave me a sketch of my front door, but with kind of the ducklings from the park walking in front of it. So real Boston memories. So I am very proud. I'll have this kind of like tropical place in Trinidad, but on the walls will be Boston. So I'm definitely literally taking parts of it with me.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I'm going to hand back to one of the other Peters, I think.
Sure. Well, maybe I can just point out again, if anybody else has any questions they want to ask in the Q&A function, we have a few minutes when we could certainly put some more questions to Peter or to Harriet. Maybe I can just throw one in to keep the ball rolling, as it were. Harriet, you and your team, over the 4 years did a really great job of bringing some incredible important and interesting visitors to our region, and as a business and education community here, we've been really thrilled to be able to meet with those visitors. Peter, obviously you're going to have this great challenge of getting people to travel is much more difficult while COVID is going on, but perhaps the question would be, what can we do in the meantime to keep those kinds of, as you mentioned, personal connections going with policymakers and important business people that we should be connecting with across the Atlantic?
So I think the UK government and lots of other governments are getting used to virtual visits. Just before I left Pakistan, we had a virtual visit by our Secretary of State for International Development. She wanted to look at one of the UK's largest international development programs and did it all virtually. So there were a series of meetings were set up via Zoom and Teams and things, and it worked very well. And I think that is a model that the UK is pursuing, and I think it's one of the ways that we can just make sure that those kind of high-level visits continue to happen, albeit in a slightly different way. But I also wanted to say that it isn't impossible to meet face to face. That those kind of meetings are still taking place, suitably distanced with all the sort of the wrapping around it. And I wouldn't want to think that we couldn't just couldn't do that. And I do want to, wherever possible, to continue to have those face-to-face meetings and to gradually get back into a situation where we are having those in-person discussions, because I think they are more rich. And they do offer opportunities that these kind of conversations, which are very easy to do and are much better at this particular moment in time, but those in-person meetings offer much more richness of discussion.
And Harriet, if we keep in touch with you, you won't need a fake Zoom background showing a beach picture behind you.
That is true. I might be reclining in the pool next time you speak to me, Peter. We can only hope.
Peter Pound, as we don't have any other written questions coming in, perhaps you'd like to take back over and maybe have a question or two of your own and any other announcements that you'd like to make.
I don't think I have any specific questions teed up. I think this has been a really wonderful opportunity. Our goal was to be able to have some sort of send off and thank you for Harriet. We all wanted it to be in person. It's unfortunate that we weren't able to do that. But we're really pleased on behalf of the BABC&E to have so many people participating today. And I've already commented to Peter and Harriet, when you look at our RSVP list, you can see the close relationship that we have with a number of organizations. There's many participating from the Oxford and Cambridge Society of New England. So thank you for your support of this event. It could be because there's a tab to my left or whatever, and I have my picture of Oxford on my over here to balance it out. Hopefully that's worked. But thank you to everyone for participating in today's event. And just a couple quick announcements out of BABC&E. Hopefully all of you have been receiving our newsletter. Our executive committee's been working very closely with Ursula to put together what we hope is a relevant and curated selection of articles and webinars and links, some of which we're putting on ourselves and some of which are being put on by partners or others. But we're going to continue to do that. We'd like to warmly invite our BABC&E members, if there are things that should be brought to our attention that we can help promote and help you and your businesses during this time, to please don't hesitate to reach out to Ursula or to the members of the board. We're glad to receive those. And if anyone actually is interested in putting on an event, we've come to learn that in the virtual era, that the size of the event doesn't matter. If you have a particular niche that you're trying to reach and you'd like us to help brainstorm ideas of people to participate, or just to help put a platform out there for you to put on that event, we are glad to help support you. So please reach out to us with suggestions. A small group that results in real connections and business is a success. So we don't measure things just by the number of participants. And finally, I saw there was a comment in the Q&A and about being able to be together socially. We're certainly watching very carefully, and please know that as soon as it's safe to be able to do so, we do plan on hopefully having an event to, in person, be able to welcome Peter. And so, please stay tuned for the newsletter and for our website for other updates in that regard. We are all very much thirsting for that, metaphorically and literally, when it comes to the social events. So, but anyway, seeing no other questions, I think I'd just like to close with a very warm thank you to Harriet. It's been a pleasure personally to get to know you. I know I speak for the members of ABACNI and from our board in thanking you for your frequent participation in our events, for reaching out to co-host things with us, and for the working relationship that we had. We're very thankful. We wish you and Phil all the greatest success in Trinidad and Tobago, and we're all going to want to take your address down as soon as we're able to travel. There will no doubt be a steady stream of visitors from us. And as well, just to welcome Peter. It is a difficult, novel time, and we are really a resource as a community for you here. All the participants here are very excited to have you join, and we'll be looking for ways to work with the consulate, to work with you and Kirsten at UK Trade and Investment, to be able to continue what we've been working on. But if there's anything that you need to help support your arrival getting off on the right foot, do not hesitate to reach out to Ursula or the board at BCNE. We're definitely here as a resource for you. So thank you so much for MIT for sponsoring the platform today and running this for us. It's greatly appreciated. And thank you to everyone for participating.
Thank you, Peter, and I wish you definitely all the best for the coming years. You will be even more needed than ever, I think, in the in the coming climate. So thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you from me as well for the warm welcome. I can't wait to get to know you all much better.
All right.
And thank you all from MIT. Thank you, Harriet, Peter, for joining us and having this fascinating conversation and allowing us to host it for you. I would also like to be remiss not to thank the MIT team who stepped in at the last minute to help make this happen. Isabella DeMembro, Kristen Gillis, and Eric Margana, who have just helped us with the technical hosting of the webinar today. So that's our credit roll at the end. Thank you all for joining us. This has been recorded as well, and Ursula asked us to make sure to tell you that she will be posting the recording to the BABCNE YouTube channel shortly. Thank you very much, everyone. Please be safe, safe travels to those that are traveling, and we'll see you all somewhere, somehow soon.
Thank you, Peter.